Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining our last CFR training webinar for the 1920 fiscal year consolidated fiscal report. This session is going to be focusing on the new schedule being added in order for us to assess the impact of the COVID-19 has had on our providers. We will also be going over some questions sent in from the providers. Any questions that are not addressed today will be answered and posted to the OMH website at a later date, along with the recordings for each session we've had this week. My name is Ken Glenmeyer, and I work for OPWDD. I'm the host of today's seminar, but the panelists primarily speaking today will be Michelle Cholinsky from Office of Mental Health. Today's goals is basically we want to provide guidance regarding the completion of the new schedule. It's going to be called the COVID-19. We also want to provide New York State agency contact information for specific questions not addressed during this training session. Questions and answers. So we in the last two sessions we mentioned that we like questions beforehand, which we did get some questions beforehand that we're going to address today. We do still have the Q&A function available in the WebEx. So on your right-hand side, there's a Q&A. Ask any questions that you can, and we will be able to address those at a later point in time. We won't be addressing any questions that are asked in the Q&A function today, but we will get to them at some point and post them online for everyone to view. If you don't have the Q&A on your right-hand side, there's at the bottom of the presentation, there's three little dots. If you press that and go up to the Q&A, that should bring that function over to the right-hand side. So other than that, like I said, a record of the questions and answers along with the presentation will be available for review at a location to be announced at a later point in time. Now, here's the contact information for each agency. SED is also one of the participating agencies on the CFR. However, they will not be represented at this training. Therefore, any questions or concerns you may have with SED related issues should be directed to your SED contact. New York State Office of Children and Family Services may submit questions regarding their submission to the OMH CFR unit. With that being said, I will pass off this to Michelle Cholinsky from OMH.
Hi, good morning. This is Michelle Cholinsky with New York State Office of Mental Health, and I will be a presenter of Session 3 of the 1920 CFR training. The COVID-19 informational schedule is a new schedule to the CFR. It is a supplemental CFR schedule. It was developed to help understand the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on each provider. It is required for all CFR submission types for 5 of the 6 New York State agencies that require a CFR. Those agencies are OPWDD, OASIS, DOH, and OCFS. The 6th New York State agency is New York State State Ed, and they will have a variation of the schedule called the COVID-19S, for which there will be separate instructions. So State Ed providers that are required to file a CFR should read through those instructions that will be available in the 1920 CFR manual very shortly. The COVID-19 informational schedule is independent of all other CFR schedules. Information reported on this schedule does not transfer to any other CFR schedule. Instructions for the COVID-19 schedule are located in Section 33B of the 1920 CFR manual. It is completed using the accrual basis of accounting. The COVID-19 schedule is not subject to certification, but should be reviewed for reasonableness. This was one of the questions that was recently presented. The COVID-19 schedule is used to report increases in program administration and program site expenses and revenues in the reporting period on a program site specific basis that are related specifically to COVID-19. Program site and program administration expenses are directly associated with the provision of services in the program site. Report all expenses incurred in the reporting period and revenues earned in the reporting period on the appropriate lines. If there is no applicable line, report the expense or revenue item on the applicable other line. There are 3 sections to complete in the COVID-19 schedule. They are the General Information section, the Program Site Data section, and the Personal Services section. Beginning with the General Information section, the provider is asked to complete a series of questions. The first question, 1A, asks, did your agency receive a loan from the Small Business Administration Paycheck Protection Program? The answer to this, yes or no. If your agency has applied for the loan but has not received the loan or been granted the loan, you would answer no to this question. This was a question that was also sent in. Question 1B asks, if you entered yes to question 1A, you then are asked to enter the total amount of the Paycheck Protection Program loan that your agency received. If during the reporting period you received a PPP loan, but then subsequently returned a portion of the loan or the loan in its entirety, you should only report the amount of the PPP loan that your agency retained. Question 1C asks you to enter the date your agency received the PPP loan. Question 2A asks, was the PPP loan your agency received forgiven in the current CFR reporting period? And you're asked to answer yes or no. If you answer yes, 2B asks you to enter the date the PPP loan was forgiven. Question 2C asks for the amount of the PPP loan that was forgiven. And question 3 asks the provider to report the total amount of revenue and gains on the extinguishment of debt recorded in the CFR reporting period that was attributable to COVID-19 funding, grants, loan forgiveness, contributions or donations, awards, and or tax credits recorded. For question 3, include in the total revenue and gains on the extinguishment of debt COVID-19 grants awarded from federal and or state agencies, counties, and private foundations. Examples are from the Small Business Administration, from FEMA, or from the Federal Communications Commission. The amount of the PPP loan that was forgiven and recorded as revenue or as a gain on the extinguishment of debt, the COVID-19 federal tax credits that were recorded as revenue, donations received as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, you will complete the program site data section of the COVID-19 informational schedule. Report expenses related to COVID-19, such as expenses of personal protection equipment, personal services in excess of normal personal services such as overtime, hazard pay, or staff that are reassigned to other positions to help with the pandemic. Expenses related to temporary housing for COVID-positive residents or exposed staff. Expenses for cleaning services and machines above and beyond what is ordinary for the program. Telecommunication expenses other than ordinary expenses, storage facilities, security measures, and interest on debt incurred to maintain staff. Report FEMA costs for emergency medical services, such as emergency medical care for COVID-19 patients, emergency operation centers, facilities, meals and meal supplies for emergency workers, as detailed in Section 6, Category B of FEMA's Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide. Restrictions apply to this. Report medical supplies and the costs of medical testing and vaccination and training. In the revenue section, report the COVID-19 funding that was recorded as revenue in the CFR reporting period, including CARES Act loans that have been forgiven and recorded as revenue or as a gain on the extinguishment of debt, and program rate changes related to COVID-19, enhanced rates, retainer day billings, flexible billing that would not normally qualify as a service. Report COVID-19 grants awarded by federal, state, and or other governmental agencies, such as FEMA grants and FCC telehealth grants, and grants awarded by private or public foundations, and report donations received in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and COVID-19 federal tax credits that are recorded as revenue. On line 64, the federal grants line, report on the following predefined entries: federal tax credits related to COVID-19, such as the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act refundable credit, the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act refundable credit, and the Employee Retention Credit. Report federal grants awarded by FEMA or the FCC, or loans that have been forgiven under the Paycheck Protection Program or under the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Emergency Advances. And finally, report payments related to COVID-19 that have been awarded through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Next, complete the third section of the COVID-19 informational schedule, personal services. This section substantially mirrors the Schedule CFR 4. Report only the personal services expenses that were incurred by your agency in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. Enter the personal service data in the same manner as the program site-specific section of Schedule CFR 4. For each position title code that is added to a program site, the standard work week is selected and the hours paid and the amount paid are entered. The total personal services expense for each program site transfers to line 1 of the program site data section of the COVID-19 schedule. For more information, refer to the instructions for the program site section of Schedule CFR 4, which is located in Section 16 of the CFR manual. This concludes the Session 3 CFR presentation. And now Ken will have some closing remarks.
Thank you, Michelle. So I hope that doesn't shock you guys. I hope you guys were able to read that ahead of time. I know Michelle has received some questions that she would like to go over. Michelle, do you have those questions ready, and are you okay to talk about them right now, or are we? I'll leave that up to you.
Ken, can you give me back the speaker?
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. Hi. So I incorporated the answers to some of the questions I received throughout the presentation. The other questions have to be discussed with the other CFR agencies first before we respond, because in some instances, the answer might vary depending on the New York State agency. I can go over just a couple that were asked, and also a couple that we will respond to in writing later. So one of the questions was, it says, how much we received in these loans affect our funding, or will our funding be cut? So this is a question OMH has gotten from a couple of providers, and I can tell you from OMH perspective that your state aid funding will not be cut because of a potential surplus in revenue on an OMH program. So, other agencies will have different types of funding. For example, OPWDD does a rate-based funding structure. So some of these questions we will refer to other agencies to respond, but from an OMH perspective, your state aid won't be cut because of any surplus in revenue that is created from a loan that is forgiven. So I'll go over a couple more. Okay, so the next one asks, this was covered, but I'll go over it again. It says, if we've applied for the PPP loan, but we have not received the loan and do not anticipate, do we answer no to the question 1 in the general information section? And yes, that is correct. If you have applied for the PPP loan or the EIDL loan, then and you have not received it, then you should answer no. And then the other question that was, if you returned some of the PPP loan or the EIDL loan in the reporting period, do you still answer yes, that you've received the loan? And the answer is if you return the entire amount of the loan in the same reporting period, then you would answer no, because you effectively have not received it. And if you've returned a portion, then you would just report the amount of the PPP loan that you retained. And the remaining questions I would like to discuss with the other New York State agencies first, and then we will respond in writing to the remainder of the questions because of the differences. There are some differences in reporting on the CFR among the New York State agencies, so I first would like to discuss it with them, and we will post responses to the questions on the New York State OMH website in the near future, and the location of the site will be disclosed shortly.
Thank you, Michelle. I apologize for putting you on the spot like that. So I think I'm going to leave the WebEx open for a little bit to allow people to ask more questions, especially if they heard everything today. I think it'll, it might have opened some people's minds, and maybe they have questions, or maybe they provided some clarity. So feel free to drop the questions in the Q&A. As we mentioned before, we're going to address all the questions, and it's going to be posted on the OMH website, along with all the recordings from the previous days and today's session. We will send out a link to where those recordings will be at a later date. It hasn't been finalized yet. We're still working with IT to set up the best location for that. But we will send a link to not just everyone registered here, but also all our agencies that are required to file a CFR for this reporting period. And that way, people that weren't able to attend will also be able to watch the recordings and listen to this. So other than that, we appreciate you guys joining this webinar series, and hope you guys have learned some few things, and hopefully this COVID schedule is not too difficult for you guys to complete. It's going to be very helpful for us to gain an understanding of what's happened in the last 4 months. Everyone's been shocked. The whole world's been shocked. So we appreciate you guys joining us, and we will be ending this session. Thank you very much.